So we're going to jump back into the closing statement provided by Hudgells representing some of the convicted subpostmasters and focus on the management failings both at Post Office and at Fujitsu. It's obviously quite shocking when we've heard from investigators and Post Office workers and legal counsel about what they were doing at the time, but the fact that the oversight was so glaringly not there, and it wasn't just a case that management were unaware of what were going on, but almost encouraged the behaviour of people below them based on the statements to the inquiry. Let's jump back into his concluding statement.
Our second main submission, and as I said earlier, this and our final submissions are much shorter, is that the management and oversight of investigations and prosecutions by the Post Office, as supported by Fujitsu, was willfully blind to or disregarding of the proper lawful administration of justice. The challenges to the integrity of Horizon, brought by sub-postmasters, were brought to the attention of management in the Post Office, in individual prosecutions, in civil claims, and eventually in the press. Still, the Post Office did not hear those warnings and/or refused to hear them. We advance 8 propositions about Phase 4 evidence on the involvement of management in investigation and prosecution. First, as the evidence of Mandy Talbot confirms, the existence of challenges to the integrity of Horizon were drawn to the attention of management, including Rod Ismay and David X. Smith, at the Post Office as early as 2005. And there is POL 20107426, the briefing on Castleton and other cases on the 23rd of November 2005 to confirm that. Second, at the very time that Noel Thomas was being investigated, suggestions made by Mandy Talbot in 2005 in the course of the Castleton case included a clear recommendation for the involvement of independent expertise beyond Fujitsu and a more consistent joined-up approach by the Post Office. Her recommendations appear to have been discussed and then largely stalled. Third, proposals for an independent external review in March 2010 were shut down following contact between several senior managers, including the head of criminal law, the head of security, and the head of product and branch accounting. Fourth, the reason for this shutdown was plainly directly linked to duties of disclosure which would arise and the impact on challenges to Horizon. Fifth, the subsequent Ismay report was a whitewash, and there's no other term for it, reflecting the stock line that Horizon was robust, agreed before February 2010, for which now no one in Post Office management appears willing to own responsibility. Sixth, despite repeated recommendations for a coordinated approach to Horizon challenges, it appears there was no substantial effort to collate a record of challenges until 2012, when Helen Rose was said to have prepared a spreadsheet of approximately 20 cases, after she produced a short report. Regrettably, this report of the 30th of August 2012 painted an incomplete and misleading picture. Seventh, this critical information relating to internal concerns around Horizon, which had gone on for so long, was not disclosed to defendants in criminal prosecutions, including where there were specific requests for disclosure of other challenges by defendants raising questions of Horizon integrity. And 8, steps taken in Post Office management after 2005 served to substantially delay the process of independent scrutiny, which began only with Second Sight and continues to this day with this inquiry. There are substantial questions to be asked over the role of management in both the Post Office and Fujitsu in shaping this scandal. Phases 3 and 4 together make clear that senior management were involved in decision-making designed to protect Horizon, to deflect challenges to Horizon, and to manage publicity around Horizon. These included members of more senior management with reporting lines into the board or roles in reporting to board level. For example, Rod Ismay through the Risk and Compliance Committee, John Scott and Susan Crichton. Mr. Ward was yesterday shown a document suggesting that access to ARQ data and contract caps were discussed at executive committee level in 2003, and that was POL 00114-566 at 37. The role and responsibility of General Counsel, both at Fujitsu and the Post Office remains to be fully explored. But it's anticipated that the inquiry will return to these themes further in phases 5 and 6.
So already the management failings are being laid bare here and paint a picture of not just management at Post Office and Fujitsu not being able to do their jobs, but actually taking positions which were to the detriment of sub-postmasters, so that they could ensure that the line horizon was robust, could constantly be placed out there. It does paint a damning picture of involvement where there is no claim that could really stand up to scrutiny that people weren't aware at executive level, due to the nature of these decisions and the people involved and the issues raised by witnesses to the inquiry during phase 4. So whilst it has been fairly damning to hear some evidence from some witnesses undertaking the roles about a lack of training and about passing the buck between different departments, one thing is clear, that management themselves were involved at both organisations and led both the Post Office and Fujitsu's response to the issues being raised, and consequently took decisions which ended up resulting in the horrendous events of the Post Office scandal.
Our third and final submission is that there was an overarching focus on the commercial interests of both the Post Office and Fujitsu, including in protecting the brand reputation of both companies, which contributed significantly and detrimentally to the fair prosecution of individuals in the face of faults in Horizon of which the Post Office were or ought to have been aware. The evidence in this phase has been informative as to why these failings might have been able to continue for so long. These are matters which the inquiry will continue to consider in phases 5 and 6. And we will return to the significance of any learning for the inquiry's recommendations at the close of the inquiry. But we have 3 main points to consider under this submission at this stage. First, culture and attitude. Emails and correspondence unearthed by this inquiry provide illustrative flashes of an arrogantly dismissive attitude adopted both by the Post Office and by Fujitsu staff when it came to Horizon challenges. The inquiry may conclude that where professional curiosity perhaps ought to have sparked inquiry, instead, assumptions were made based upon a prevailing institutional attitude which started with postmasters wrongly deemed responsible for all loss and ended with the assumption that all postmasters were crooks in absence of evidence to the contrary. This was not just a coalface problem which could be explained away as workplace banter, never intended to see the light of day. It was a thoroughly defensive attitude designed to protect the interests of the business and which impacted decision-making. In POL 0016970 on the 22nd of October 2010, Rod Ismay forwarded on the Jarnail Singh bandwagon email to others in very senior board-level positions at the Post Office, including Dave Smith, Susan Crichton, who was General Counsel, Mike Young and others. And he said Dave and the executive team have been aware of the significance of these challenges and have been supportive of the excellent work going on in so many teams to justify the confidence that we have in Horizon and in our supporting processes. That much demonstrates how widespread this attitude was and how high up it went. Far from reprimanding Mr. Singh for his emotive, gloating response to the conviction of a postmaster, the executive team were associated with the thanks offered by management to him for his efforts. This was, of course, over a year since the Computer Weekly article in 2009, at least 6 months since Post Office rolled out its stock line that Horizon was robust, and very shortly after Mr. Ismay had completed his Horizon Integrity Report in August 2010. Over at Fujitsu years earlier, for Jan Holmes, Jason Coyne, the independent expert instructed in the Cleveley's case, was dismissed as a git. And Peter Sewell later, of course, called Mr. Castleton, quote, a nasty chap. Asked about his role in the 2007 bug reported to Post Office in 2009, he said, quote, we all protect our own companies, unquote. And that's at INQ 40/16 at pages 111 to 112. The inquiry might ask what, if anything, was ever done by Post Office and or Fujitsu senior management and board to dispel or to discourage this kind of us and them blinkered, win-at-all-costs culture. Was it rather, at the very least, tacitly encouraged? Secondly, recoveries, performance and reward. In phases 3 and 4, the inquiry heard evidence of the keen focus placed on recovery of perceived losses, both in policy and in practice, to the Post Office business. This is consistent with the entire security team being, for several years where documents were available, subject to performance targets requiring first 40% recovery of losses, with a later increase in the target to 65%. While some witnesses denied this figure was connected to any performance-related bonus, others accepted that performance was marked against targets, and performance informed both team and individual bonuses. Recovery was one aspect of that performance. The inquiry may consider that the enthusiasm with which individual investigators self-assessed their over-target recoveries speaks for itself, and look at the evidence of Steve Bradshaw and Robert Daly, for example, if required, to see where that evidence was. This target was a measure of the importance with which these recoveries were treated by the business, despite growing attention on the repeated challenge to the integrity of Horizon, following reports in the press and in the broadcast media in 2009. Third, and finally under this, protecting the brand. Post Office policy and the actions of individuals were openly driven by an interest in protecting the reputation of the business and in protecting the brand. There was evidence too of similar action by Fujitsu employees. At its nadir of this public relations driven approach to justice, the inquiry has uncovered the company line written by the communications team, distributed by Jarnail Singh, to be adopted by, quote, agents and counsel, unquote, in response to any defence based on Horizon integrity, and which was adopted wholesale in witness statements for court. The duty to investigate, to truly ask whether there were any problems in the integrity of Horizon accounts, was to be deflected by a generic statement, first appearing as the stock line that Horizon was robust, then again in 2012 as Our Story, on second sight to be released to legal agents and counsel, and the final agreed draft being prepared by the head of public relations and media in an exchange copied to the company secretary and general counsel. And the inquiry heard, of course, about the PR input on Our Story prepared on appointment of second sight, which again said Horizon was robust, and it was distributed to agents and counsel and made its way into witness evidence for court, the evidence, the witness statements of Stephen Bradshaw.
So it's clear from those conclusions that it was reputation above everything else, and that was the key driver motivating both businesses, certainly at a senior level, protecting the brand at all costs. And we've now seen laid bare in front of us what all costs meant for the innocent sub-postmasters that were wrongly convicted as part of the Post Office scandal.